Hi, my name is Mark Tolbert, and the following is a presentation that I did for the Washington, D.C. PMI Chapter, their Fair Lakes Luncheon Group meeting back on December 6th of last year of 2022. And the title of my presentation is Hybrid Project Management, Using Agile with Traditional PM Methodologies to Succeed on Modern Projects.
So today we're going to have the hybrid project management with Agile and traditional methodologies from Mark Tolbert. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks so much for having me here to present. This is a great opportunity for me. Very happy to have this time with you guys. Talk about one of my favorite topics, hybrid project management. So what we're going through this afternoon is this presentation is heavily based on a book we published just about 2 years ago. So October of 2020, we published the book you're seeing here, Hybrid Project Management, Using Agile with Traditional PM Methodologies to Succeed on Modern Projects. Everything that we will go through in the presentation here is, of course, in the book, but it's a book. So it's almost 200 pages. So there's a lot more in the book too. For instance, we talk about how Agile can help us solve some key risks that we all face on projects. So one of my favorites is allowing half-baked ideas to survive and basically torpedo, submarine the whole project. So Agile can really help us deal with that, as well as what I call the impossible project. We're all in the situations where management, sales, somebody throws over the fence to us some idea, some new project they want us to go manage, and it's got impossible constraints. So they want it, of course, yesterday or in a time frame that's ridiculous. And we're thinking, what were you thinking? How can you come and manage this? How do you think this could get done? Or there's no budget. We never have all the budget we really need, right? To get the right resources to manage this project. So Agile can also really help us with that situation too. I talk about where does Agile really fit with the PMBOK guide? There's a lot of thought that the PMBOK guide, so from version 6, version 5, going back, was really aligned with waterfall and predictive methods. Is that true? So I don't really agree with that, but a lot of people thought that. So we talk about where does Agile really fit in with the PMBOK guide? What could PMI do to add on, take things out of the Agile practice guide or other documents, version 7, and build out the PMBOK guide to make it more robust and make it handle those problems. So the book goes into a lot more things. So, but our topic today and what we're going to delve in today is just really strictly on hybrid project management. So here's some short biographical information on Susan and myself. So Susan Parente helped me write this book. She contributed a key chapter in the book on virtual Agile, how to do Agile in the virtual environment. And you can see down here, Susan has a wealth of certifications. In fact, I think Susan has more certifications than any other project manager I think I've come across. And so she's got, of course, the PMI-ACP certification, the PMP certification from PMI, but from Scrum Alliance, she's got these. She's got those from scrum.org. She's a PSM1, and so a wealth of other things too. So she's also an adjunct professor with UVA and Montclair State and Post University. She has her own company, S3 Tech. So Susan has taught a number of classes for me, for corporate classes that we've done over the years, PMP, Agile classes, and we plan to write even more books. So do another sequel to the existing hybrid book with some more thoughts on that. Here's a little bit about myself, and I would like this also to be a pretty interactive presentation. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what we're going through today, and even down the road. So I'd love to hear back from you. Keep the conversation going. If you got ideas, please send them to me. I put my email address up here on the top. So my career was with Hewlett-Packard, HP, so 27 years with HP, 1980 through 2007. kind of the first half up until the early 90s, I was a technical guy, systems engineer, supporting customers in the Baltimore, Washington area on an outdated, defunct or mothballed architecture now. So HP 3000s and MPE. And I was an operating system specialist. I managed hot sites, what we called hot sites in the escalation center there. And they decided that they would start moving away from the HP 3000s to other architectures in the early 90s. So time for me to move on. And I moved into project management and program management. Actually got my PMP in 1995. So version 1, version 1 of the PMBOK guide is what we were dealing with in 1995, getting ready for this. And stayed with HP, managed programs in the HP services, HP support. And I left HP, took an early retirement package in 2007. I knew I didn't really want to retire, so what to do next? And I decided to move into teaching project management classes, taught PMP prep classes for some REP companies, registered education providers, Velociteach, Edwell programs. And then around 2010, I decided I would like to start my own company and create my own sets of materials. So I did that. And that worked out real well for me. I taught classes for a number of corporations, mostly in this area, Baltimore, Washington area, but kind of broader across the Eastern Seaboard. The Census Bureau, the US Census Bureau was kind of my main customer. I was their preferred provider for PMP prep classes for more than 10 years. Up till COVID, and the federal government shifted gears and kind of moved away, at least the Census Bureau has moved away from the PMP and decided to focus more on what's called the FAC PPM certification, their own internal certification for project management. I taught PMP prep classes for the DC chapter for a long time too. So for more than 10 years, I would teach a lot of times 2 PMP prep classes for us for the DC chapter. I got involved with the DC chapter right away after getting my PMP certification, served on a number of different board positions. So I was VP of professional development, so the PMP training program, other classes in the early 2000s, then became VP of programs after that for 3 years or so. And from 2009 through 2013, I was the trustee of the DC chapter too. So a lot of good experience with the chapter. So our topic today is about hybrid project management. So kind of define what are we really talking about here? People mean different things by hybrid project management. So we're going to clarify that, articulate what we mean, and then discuss, is it really necessary? Do we have to come up to speed and get good at doing hybrid? And Susan and I both strongly think that we do. We think it is absolutely necessary today. But a lot of people in the project management community, especially the Agilists, the people in the Agile community, a lot of them push back against using hybrid, and they say it's a big mistake. So one of my favorite authors is Jeff Sutherland, who is one of the co-inventors of Scrum, one of the co-creators. He and Ken Schwaber created Scrum over 20 years ago. And Sutherland, who wrote a brilliant book, one of my favorite books is Scrum, The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time. And Sutherland would strongly advise us and warn us to never do hybrid at least in the sense of mixing Agile with waterfall. He said, if you do that, you're going to fail. You're going to create a big mess, and you're going to corrupt the Agile parts of the project, and it's not going to be good. So he would strongly advise us to not do that. And a lot of the other key authors in the Agile community agree with that point of view. So we'll address that. So we think that we have to come up to speed with using Agile together effectively with waterfall. So we're going to embrace that. And so part of that is, and where do we use Agile? So what pieces, what parts or sub-projects or components of our projects are most appropriate for using Agile, most conducive to using Agile? And what parts should we use predictive or waterfall? Where does that belong? And then a lot of our projects are large, complex projects with pieces that are probably most suitable for doing predictive and other pieces most suitable for Agile. How do we marry the two? How do we integrate them together so they don't get in each other's way, so we don't have that big mess? So that's kind of what we're about. That's an agenda. And again, I'd love to hear your thoughts as we're going along here. Ollie or anybody else, if I'm missing, and it's hard for me to keep track of what's going on in the chat window, if somebody has a question, either put it into the chat or speak up, and we'll deal with questions too as we go along. Okay, so
we didn't have any questions so far, but we'll definitely follow.
Okay, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, so two views of what it means to do hybrid project management. So one is not controversial. One is very, very simple. And a lot of people mean by doing hybrid, we'll just mix together different Agile methodologies. So probably mix Scrum. Scrum, the literature tells us that 70% or more of all people using Agile today are using Scrum. It's the easiest to come up to speed with, so it's pretty easy to adopt. So a lot of people are using Scrum, but they're also mixing in Kanban or Lean or perhaps Extreme, XP, for the software components of the project and stuff. So this really isn't controversial, even though some authors like Jim Highsmith, I think Mike Griffiths, others would say, even though Scrum is very easy to start using and come up to speed with, it takes a long time to really get good at it and to perfect it. And so they would say, stick with just pure Scrum, simple Scrum, stick with that at least 6 months, 9 months, maybe even longer, before you venture out and start adding in other things like Kanban with it. Get good at doing Scrum first before trying that. Okay, so the thing that's controversial, where a lot of the Agile community really takes offense, is mixing Agile with waterfall or predictive. And they would say, never, never do that. Again, Sutherland says, don't do that. They would say, if you do this, if you mix Scrum plus water plus fall, you're going to end up with Scrum plus water plus fail. What do you think? Is that right? So Susan and I would say, no, that's not right. We would say we have to embrace, there still is a time and place for predictive or for waterfall. We have to embrace it. It hasn't lost its purpose in life. We still need it. So we're going to use predictive in some places today. We just need to know where. And then you are right, Mr. Sutherland, you are right that if we don't do this carefully, there are big risks and we can end up with a big mess. So we need to do this appropriately or effectively so that we don't corrupt the Agile pieces. When did the Agile Manifesto come out? Anybody know? That's 2001. That's 21 years ago, right? And in the DC chapter, I was VP of programs in around 2003, 2004, signing up speakers for dinner meetings and for PM Tools meetings and for other things. And guess what? In the early 2000s at that time, the presentations on Agile were the hottest ticket in town. We had the highest attendance in our chapter for those types of meetings. And at dinner meetings, and we had hundreds of people come attend our dinner meetings at that time too. And we casually just discussions with people, they'd say, how many of you are using Agile? And a lot of people would raise their hand and say, yeah, we're using it. But what we're actually doing is hybrid. But the more I talked to them, the more we found out that a lot of people are just kind of mixing together Agile and waterfall willy-nilly in any way they chose. And that's not right. That can lead to some big mistakes and ends up leading to corrupted Agile. I've got 3 boys. The 2 oldest ones are in IT. And my oldest son, David, came to me one time, Dad, I have to be downtown in Washington, D.C. every morning. This is before COVID. I have to be downtown. This is a DOD or a DHS project program. We have to be down for a stand-up meeting. But Dad, the stand-up meetings are a full hour status meeting. Is that what a status meeting? Is that what a stand-up meeting is supposed to be? No. What's a stand-up meeting supposed to be? 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And it's for the developers, it's for the team. And they just go through 3 questions. Do you remember those in Scrum, what the 3 questions are? What did I get done yesterday? Or what did I get done since the last stand-up meeting? What am I going to work on today? And what obstacles am I facing? So the whole team, the 5 to 10 people, they can go through that in 10 minutes, stay standing up. It's kind of like a rugby huddle, a scrum, and stay standing up and get through that very quickly. They don't try to solve any of the problems, the obstacles that are brought up. They don't solve them in the stand-up meeting. Those are taken offline, but everybody's hearing about them. And so they're going to have ideas. They're going to come to the person with useful ideas about how to solve their problems. A lot of people I've talked to about using Agile say, yeah, but we still really wanted to use a scheduling tool too with our Agile project. So we're using Artemis, or we're using MS Project to figure out the critical path for the next 6 months, 9 months. What do you think of that? Does that make any sense? No, that doesn't make any sense. You're not going to define the critical path in an Agile project. Why? Because it's a given that everything is going to change from iteration to iteration. There's going to be tremendous change. The backlog is changing. That's changing how long things are going to take. So there's no point at the very beginning when you're doing release planning for the next 6 to 9 months. There's no point in trying to figure out what the critical path is and dependencies between everything and stick by that critical path. That is not Agile. That's 180 degrees from Agile. How about trying to do Agile but have the classic PMP project manager, the large and in charge, the command and control, the accountable project manager? Is that going to work? No, that's not going to work. In Agile, we need to provide a lot of freedom and trust to the team members so that they can discover and explore the backlog items of requirements. So we don't have the classic project manager figuring out the accountable for the project management plan, accountable for the WBS and the work packages, handing out the work packages to all the people, ensuring, watching their progress, monitoring, controlling, ensuring they're sticking on the plan. No, that's not Agile. In Agile, the team is accountable for the work, and they're deciding what they're going to work on next. So the classic command and control project manager is not involved. What do we call the project manager typically in Agile? What's the closest role in Agile to the project manager? The Scrum Master. And this is not that large and in charge. This is somebody who's kind of making life easier for the team, is removing obstacles, making sure they aren't interrupted. That's their role. They're kind of a coordinator almost. And a lot of people are doing Agile, but management maybe doesn't want to come to all these review meetings or these different types of meetings that are occurring. So if we're not having very frequent communications with management and the product owner, then that's a big mistake too. We have to make hybrid work. That's kind of the main premise of this presentation. Why? Because as I said before, a lot of our projects are very large, complex projects. You are doing that. I'm very confident that most of you are managing very large, complex projects, at least some of the time. And in that world, some of the sub-projects, some of the pieces are going to be what I call cookie cutter. They're going to be types of projects that we've done over and over hundreds of times before. They're cookie cutter. And when we're in that world and we're dealing with cookie cutter projects or sub projects, guess what? We have a wealth of information from the previous projects, the similar projects, that will give us excellent estimates of time and cost. We will know when this project's likely to end and what it's going to cost. And we'll also have great templates of key documents like a scope statement, a charter, a WBS, a risk register. And so when we're in that world, when we're in that cookie cutter world, it makes a lot of sense. Keep things simple, right? Keep it simple, stupid, KISS. So have the classic accountable command and control project manager who is accountable. She is accountable for the PM plan and is putting everything together up front and is assigning work to the team members or subcontractors, and often in many cases, that's going to be less expensive. Why? How many people are supposed to be involved typically on a Scrum team in Agile? If we're using Scrum, how many people are involved? 5 to 10 people. And these people, we've got the Scrum Master, we've got the product owner, and we've got 5 or more developers, team members, and they are senior people. We want them to be comfortable taking on multiple types of jobs. They're T-skilled people. So they've got one core strength. So that's the stem of the T, the base of the T, and then across the top of the T, they are comfortable taking on other type of work too. Guess what? Senior people like that are really expensive because they're hard to come by. And if you've got to have 5 to 10 of them that are dedicated to the project, that's very expensive. That would be a non-starter in my world. Management would never go for that. In my world, I would be really lucky if I could get 2 or 3 dedicated people, and to get 2 or 3 dedicated senior people was even a bigger ask. So that's hard to do. How is that in your world? Are you able to get, is it commonplace that you can get a team of 5 to 10 senior, co-located, dedicated people on your projects? Is that something that management is often going to buy into in your world? Just put an answer into the chat if you don't mind. So I'm getting a lot of people agreeing with me, I think, that that's not that practical. I could sell management in my world if it was something of real high visibility, real high importance with a real tight time frame, deadline. Yeah, then I probably can get management to agree with that. But that's going to be a kind of a special case in my world where I can get that. And they're going to tell me, Mark, sorry, you're going to have to make this work with people working part-time. You're not going to be able to get all these senior people that you would really like. I know you really want them, but guess what? That's too expensive, and we need these people elsewhere. Okay, I don't see anybody saying they can always get that. Okay, so a lot of times, if we are in that cookie cutter world, this is the type of project we've done over and over and over again. We've got excellent historical records to give us estimates of time and cost. It's going to be cheaper, more efficient to go the classic waterfall predictive planning way. So just a quick history lesson. What industry did modern project management arise from? Where did this all start from in the 1960s? Maybe go back a little earlier in the 1950s. Construction and engineering. So much of what we teach in our PMP prep classes comes to us from construction and engineering and DoD. The WBS comes from earned value, and that comes from the 1960s in DoD. And a lot of this stuff, critical path method, comes from DuPont at that time. And what's the life cycle model in construction? It's waterfall and predictive planning. Figure everything out in detail up front in construction. You better get those blueprints signed off and have them, all the I's dotted, the T's crossed, everything nailed down up front before you start construction, because oops, if you find there was a big mistake in the blueprints or the design, 2 weeks, 3 weeks after you started construction, whoa, the rework's going to be very expensive. Somebody's going to be looking for a new job. So we better get all the plans and the blueprints, everything nailed down up front in construction and engineering. But in our world today, things changed in a huge way in the early 90s. Tom Friedman goes through this in a number of his books. The World is Flat. That used to be us, how America fell behind in the world it created. Things changed in a huge way in the early 1990s. And he points out 2 key reasons why. A, globalization. The breakup of the Soviet Union in 1991 ushers in a new era of globalization. China, India, other countries enter our marketplaces. Guess what? Things get a heck of a lot tougher. The competition, the bar is raised, things get much tougher. What else happens in the early 90s? The internet. And the internet has changed the whole world, the way we play, the way we work, the way we do basically everything. And all this has brought about tremendous change and some adjectives that apply to your world and my world and everything today. It's much more difficult for you guys now being project managers than it was for me, in the early 90s when this all started. And some key phrases, some key adjectives that apply to our world now are make dust or eat dust. If you're standing still, you're falling behind. The only constant is change itself. That's ancient Greek philosophy, actually. That's Heraclitus from 500 BC. And we're dealing with global marketplaces, much tougher competition. Our customers are more difficult to deal with. They're more demanding, they're more fickle. Here's Jeff Sutherland's catchphrase. I love this last one, change or die. So things are much tougher. There's much more volatility, and that makes life tougher for you. Tom Friedman calls this now an age of accelerations, and companies need us. They really, really need us, you, to help them solve key problems. They can't stay competitive in marketplaces. They can't stay up in the marketplaces unless they have project managers able to help them come up with new products and services that resonate with their customers and their base. So you guys, you're agents of change and your drivers are change, and they need us to be up to speed on all the methodologies. What methodology is most important for dealing with all this change and accelerations? Of course, that's Agile. And is this true in your world today? Are you seeing quite a few projects with this type of change, this type of volatility? Again, put an answer into the chat box. Let's see how that all goes. Is this pretty typical for you guys? Okay, I think most people are saying yes, that you are having to deal with this. Okay, excellent. Okay, what happens if we're in that type of world where there's tremendous volatility with the requirements? The customer doesn't know what they really want starting out, and we need to discover and explore, and things are going to change real quickly with what's available, the technologies available. If you try to use waterfall in that environment, what the heck is going to happen? This isn't going to work well. So here's kind of an oversimplified classic phase structure, project lifecycle for a software project. There's always a lot of change and volatility typically in software. So we got these classic phases. When do we meet with the customer? Well, just up front at the beginning in conceptual design. So we do that to go get requirements, and then we go away. And we do our detailed design, figure out file layouts, hierarchically decompose the application from programs down to subroutines, down to modules and functions and such. Then the programmers go away for probably a year to code this application. And then we go into testing. And we don't really meet with the customer for probably a year, 18 months until this application's done, until we finally get to that fantastic event, UAT, user acceptance testing. And in the classic way, if we did things waterfall this way, how's that going to work out? How's UAT going to work? How's that going to go? Not well at all. Why? Because how long was it before we really delivered something working to the customer? More than a year. Maybe we showed them mock-ups or certain prototypes, but we didn't show them the real application with real response times and throughput and such, and GUIs and how everything was really going to work until UAT. And they're not happy in UAT. Why? Because the world has changed. It's a year and a half. The world has changed. A lot of new technologies, a lot of new capabilities, and they want these new things. Maybe we delivered exactly what was called for in the original SOW and the original specifications for this, but nonetheless, it didn't achieve the value that they were looking for. This isn't working the way they wanted. So they're not happy at all. If we try to deliver this type of project, something involving volatile requirements, volatility in capabilities, technologies that are available, that's just not going to deliver the right value. Also, at the very beginning, back in conceptual design, when we get requirements, what's the customer going to give us in requirements gathering? Everything under the sun, everything remotely connected with this project. They give us everything. Doesn't the federal government do that in their RFPs? Sorry to pick on my federal government project managers, but yes, that's just so common. They throw the kitchen sink into the requirements starting out in the project. Are they going to use all that? Never. So an old standard survey going back to the 90s said that 65% of the requirements a customer thinks they have to have right up front, 65% will never be used. And there's some unhappiness, there's controversy about how the Standish group came up with that 65% number, but something that is pretty well accepted, has broad-based acceptance, is another version of Pareto's Law. Pareto's Law has so many applications in almost everything. You PMPs, and I know a lot of you are PMPs, you all know that 80% of our problems come from 20% of the causes. That's one version of Pareto's Law. In sales, it's 80% of your orders comes from 20% of the customers. And in requirements, it is 80% of the customer's need comes from 20% of the requirements. So in Agile, if we focus in on that 20%, the MVP, the minimum viable product, and we go after that, then we're going to achieve value much more quickly. We're going to get something out the door that truly does have value in a much faster time frame for a lot less money. So in this volatile world of very changing requirements, this is absolutely necessary. Don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I hope you know something about Scrum. This is just a nice overview of the Scrum process. So we've got our 1 to 4 week iteration or sprint. And so that's our main loop here, this loop here. And so again, 1 to 4 weeks, we've got the daily stand-up meetings. That's this loop up on top. We've got 3 key meetings. Or 4 key meetings. We have a sprint planning meeting to figure out what subset of the requirements, what subset of the backlog we're going to go after in the sprint. We have at the end of the sprint a review meeting where we bring in the product owner to check out what we've created in the sprint, to approve it or accept it or not. And then there's a retrospective meeting where the team all gets together. This is for the team. They do a lessons learned. What worked well, what didn't work so well, what are we going to do differently next time? And then we've already talked about it. So every day, first thing in the day, we'll have a daily stand-up. Again, that's for the team. The product owner, other stakeholders can attend, but they don't speak. This is just for the team members. And again, they go through 3 questions. What did I accomplish yesterday? Or what did I accomplish since the last stand-up meeting? What am I going to work on today? And what obstacles am I facing? There are also 3 key roles. So the product owner is responsible for the backlog and putting priorities on the backlog items, the requirements. The team helps the product owner put together the backlog, but the product owner assigns the priorities, and the product owner is the key person in the review meeting approving what got created. We have a Scrum Master, the closest thing to the project manager, but this is not that large and in charge, command and control, PMP type project manager. This is a servant leader who is making life easier for the team. They're carrying food and carrying water. They're making sure they're not interrupted, they're not interfered with. They are also the owners of the methodology. If there's questions on how to run a particular meeting, they are the go-to person to answer that question. And again, then we have the team. So if it's software, these would be programmers, testers, quality control people, analysts, design people. And typically the whole team is 5 to 10 people. So a quick overview of Scrum. So predictive was plan driven. So you remember our triple constraints. So in the first thing, the first key knowledge area, so we start with integration in the PMBOK guide, and then we go into scope and we start figuring out scope. And that helps us then figure out time and the schedule. And then we figure out costs, cost estimates, and put together the budget. So we start figuring out scope. We dig into scope in the predictive way, figure it out in detail up front. And Agile turns that on its head. It turns that upside down, where we fix time and we fix cost at the beginning. We fix time because the iterations are fixed. They're going to be 1 to 4 weeks. We also have a fixed team, the 5 to 10 people. They are the main driver of our costs. So we know what the costs are of each iteration. If I've got perhaps 8 people, maybe my costs for each iteration are $80,000. And maybe I decide I'm going to do 10 iterations. So I know what the costs are going to be for those 10 iterations for the released $800,000. So we fix time, we fix cost, and then we go explore, discover, scope. So we explore the backlog items. The team is figuring out, so we're given functional descriptions of the stories or the features, and the team figures out what engineering design would work best, provide the most value for implementing those functional descriptions of the scope of the requirements, the stories and such. So this is value driven in Agile. So let's move on. Scrum was supposed to be very lightweight, easy to use, easy to come up to speed with. So people doubted, people said, well, then how do I deal with my large complex projects? And the designers of Scrum, so Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland, they said, oh, easy. We can use Scrum in a more complex environment. We just have multiple Scrum teams. So here I've got 6 Scrum teams. So I'm dividing up the project into 6 sub-projects or 6 component pieces. And we'll have 6 different Scrum teams working on all that. And we'll coordinate everything. We'll integrate everything through Scrum of Scrum meetings. So maybe once a week, we'll have something like a stand-up meeting, or several times a week, we'll have a Scrum of Scrum meetings where each Scrum team sends a representative to the Scrum of Scrums. And in the Scrum of Scrums, they figure out dependencies and they coordinate their work in the Scrum of Scrums. So can I make that work in a hybrid project? Can I make this idea work in a hybrid project where some of the pieces, instead of just being Scrum teams and Agile pieces, some of the pieces are being done in a predictive way, a traditional way. Yes, why not? Why can't I do that? So now I have one piece here that is being done waterfall or predictive, and the classic traditional PM attends that Scrum of Scrum meetings as a part of the Scrum of Scrum meetings to figure out dependencies and to do the coordination. So that could work, can't it? That's going to work. That's one way to make sure that we can glue together and integrate the waterfall pieces together with the Agile pieces. But another idea that we like better, Susan and I like better, is do this type of idea. Have a program layer on top or a governance layer on top that does the integration, that glues everything together. So it's a large, complex project, and we have these 6 Scrum teams doing Agile pieces of this large, complex project. And then we have 3 other sub-projects that are being managed by the classic, traditional, accountable project manager. And instead of all attending Scrum of Scrum meetings, we have a program layer on top that's doing the integration. So probably our classic type of project manager is up on top at the, or program manager is up on top, doing the coordination, doing the governance of all these different sub-projects and component pieces. And I think that could work too. The big advantage that this idea has over the preceding idea of the Scrum of Scrum ideas is this governance layer can do more than just do the coordination of all the different sub-projects. They can do a key thing that is often needed, especially in the federal government world. A lot of times management wants translation of the Agile types of reports, the burn down charts, the burn up charts, charts measuring velocity and things like that. They want even the Agile components to report perhaps things in the classical way, earned value reports and stuff. And the Agilists don't really want to do that. So the governance layer can take care of doing the translation into some common classic report formats that senior management or management always wants to see. So it's not only taking care of scheduling and coordinating work prioritization between all the different sub-projects in the program, but also translation into the different types of report formats that everybody wants to see. And we think this is probably even a better idea than the Scrum of Scrum ideas. Another thing is if you've got a large complex project, you really need a product owner at the program level to do the prioritization and coordinate the priorities of all these different sub-projects and component pieces. So the program here, this governance layer, can take on that product owner role. They've got to define how things are going to work between all the different teams. And Agile, we need a very enlightened type of culture, a lot of freedom, a lot of trust, so people can be creative and explore the requirements the way they need to. So the governance layer, this program layer on top, can ensure that that is happening. Okay, so things that this governance layer should not do. So they should not get into micromanaging the Agile pieces, the Agile components. We don't want to interfere with, again, take away that freedom and trust that the Agile teams so need to be able to succeed. So they shouldn't do that. Don't command and control, monitor, control the Agile pieces like a classic project. Don't mix the predictive waterfall planning approaches and force the Agile pieces to do that. So again, don't define a critical path. Don't make the Agile sub-projects and components define a critical path. Don't make them use a WPS work breakdown structure. They're using something different. They're using a feature breakdown structure. Let them stick with that. The WBS is all about nouns and things and, physical things. And the Agilists are given stories, something with functional requirements, so customer-facing requirements, and you're giving the freedom to the team to go figure out how to implement those functional requirements. What engineering design best implements that? So don't hand to them a WBS, a work package, and just have them create them. Let them figure out what engineering specification or design is going to work best. Does that make sense? Don't make the Agile teams follow the classic formal change control things. Let them, they need to decide to what degree they're going to document things and follow change control. We're allowing the teams the freedom to do that. Okay, so where are we going to use predictive? Just to summarize things, where are we going to use predictive and waterfall, and where are we going to use Agile? So for predictive, we'll use predictive waterfall if the customer knows up front what they want and they know in detail what they want going in. And it's a type of project that we've done many, many times before. We're in cookie cutter. If we've done this hundreds and hundreds of times before, then we are going to have very solid estimates of time and cost. We're going to have very good templates, project documents, such as the ones I'm listing here. And this is going to be less expensive, and it's going to be more efficient to go with the classic predictive planning approach and have the classic traditional accountable project manager. And you're probably going to have team members working part-time. And in my world, a lot of my team members were subcontractors working on fixed price contracts. And I had to ensure that the I's were dotted, the T's were crossed. I did have to kind of police everything, almost micromanage things and be on top of everything that was happening from the subcontractors. So that was necessary. It was fixed price.
Mark, it's probably a good question from Moat. He had it in the very beginning of your presentation.
Okay.
And he probably works on construction projects in energy sector.
Right.
And he's saying that we can only use hybrid and waterfall. And is there any possibility to use Agile only in the energy sector?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say no, again, that in construction, you have to get those blueprints and other plans and documents. You're going to have to get everything nailed down very precisely before you start. You go into the quote unquote executing phases or construction phases, because it's going to be too costly. If there's a mistake and you have to do the rework and undo, tear stuff and redo it, that's hugely expensive. But we'll see, you can still bring in some of the Agile culture. You can make very good use of some Agile types of reports and things that improve communications. That will benefit any project. So we'll talk about that. So you can implement some parts of Agile, but I don't see you really going to a pure Agile type thing. Maybe if everything was, you were using CAD for everything and you're just moving bits around software, it's just all software, then there isn't the huge cost for the rework. But
and plus you still need to apply for permits, right?
Yeah. So I think you're pretty still stuck with get those blueprints, completely solid. My son, my youngest son, works for a construction company, and he leads he's got a team of about 3-4 people doing CAD for doing all the electrical and the plumbing in office buildings that are designing and stuff. And he said to me, "Dad, if my blueprints for the plumbing electrical, if we're off by 1/4 of an inch, there's hell to pay." Somebody's in deep trouble. When we go to, this has to be clash free, as he called it. We have to know things precisely down to that level of precision. Does that make sense? Okay, so where do we use Agile? So it's just the opposite. In predictive, we're going in with the assumption the customer knows what they want at the start in detail. Is maybe you and your wife, you and your husband or spouse, you're remodeling your kitchen, and you've agreed on exactly what's going to go into that kitchen, the appliances, the type of countertops. What are you putting in? Are you putting in quartz, granite, so on? You're nailing everything down precisely at the beginning. You know what you want at the beginning. And Agile is for software, for knowledge work, intellectual work, design work. The customer doesn't know what they want at the beginning, and we're going to discover, explore through these short iterations what is going to be needed for the project. Also, it's often the case that we know there's going to be tremendous changes with what's available technology-wise. The world is changing so fast, we've got to do things in short iterations to provide value, because things are going to get outdated. The life cycle, the product life cycle for what we're creating might not be that long. In software, in my world, sometimes we created applications that were meant, we knew they were only going to last like a year, and then they're going to be replaced by something else. And there was just such new technologies and things to take advantage of. We had to stay on top of that. Sometimes, again, we're given those impossible constraints, impossible budget constraint, impossible schedule constraint, and we can solve the problem if we can find the MVP, the minimum viable product, if we can figure out the 20% of the requirements that are going to meet 80% of their need, and we can create that very, very quickly, then maybe we can beat that crazy schedule constraint or very difficult schedule or budget constraint. Sometimes we just need to, very early in the game, get a validity check. We're not sure exactly what design's going to work best, so create something empirical, something tangible, get it out to the customer quickly as possible, let them kick the tires. A beautiful quote on this topic is, actually, we brought this guy in. His name was Doug DiCarlo. He wrote a brilliant book called Extreme Project Management. We brought him in to speak at a DC chapter dinner meeting, probably around 2010. And one of his favorite quotes was, "If a picture is worth 1,000 words, a prototype is worth 1,000 pictures." So we're doing something empirical and tangible in these iterations, and that allows the product owner, the customers, other managers to get that quick validity check on what we've created in the iteration. And a corollary of that, sometimes we just need to check for a particular architectural design and see if it's going to work. We do a spike, an architectural spike, to check that as quickly as we can, get a check on that, or check on risks in the same way. Okay, I've got a couple more slides. Here's some other things. So anything that helps you improve communications is a good idea. And Agile brings to the table some tremendous things, aids for improving communications. Their charts, such as burn down and burn up charts, they're very easy to understand. How many managers do you know? How many senior managers do you know that are going to understand what the heck is going on in an S-curve, an earned value report, showing all the earned value variables and forecast, EAC, VAC, earned value, planned value? How many are really going to understand that when you put that all on a chart? Not many. In my world, not many managers or type of people are going to understand a lot of our classic dashboard reports like that. Those are high tech and low touch. The Agile reports, all these things are really intuitive. They're easy to understand. Anyone can understand a burn down chart, burn up chart, and do forecasting from it. So you can use that even in construction. You could put together burn down charts, burn up charts, Kanban boards, and that's going to aid communications, speeding up your communications with all these key stakeholders, speeding up the feedback loops and the interactions, a key fundamental part of Agile. That's a good idea for any project. Can we use Agile in the virtual world? Well, we have to, since COVID for sure. COVID pushed us kicking and screaming into the virtual world. So we have to be able to do this. And yes, it can be used. And tools like what we're using right now, Zoom, all these other tools allow us. You could even have stand-up meetings using Zoom. You could have an open Zoom window, that people just keep open, and ways to get hold of other team members very, very quickly. So yes, this can be done. This is being done. Can you use Agile with small teams? Yes. Even some of the main publications in Scrum.org agree that you can use maybe even less than 5 people for Scrum or for other Agile methodologies. So to sum up, final summary, is hybrid project management necessary? Yes, absolutely. There still is a time and place for predictive and waterfall. There's some things that's just easier to do, faster, efficient, more efficient, less money. Yes, there are risks in going hybrid. So make sure that you don't do things that are going to lead you into a big mess and corrupted Agile. So things that we talked about, but we can make this work. So I sped through a lot of stuff there. I'm fine with sticking around if you guys can stick around to discuss any of this or answer questions. Questions? How many people agree in the chat? Would you mind? How many agree that there still is a place for predictive? We have to embrace predictive still. It's not gone away. And how many people agree that we've got to figure it out better? We've got to get more proficient at mixing using Agile together with predictive. Ollie, for those who raised a hand, can we have them turn on their mics? Can people just talk?
Mark, I think we're over time, and so we have to be a little respectful. People may have meetings and stuff that they go to. So
sure.
I think we're going to have to end it there, Ollie. Well, you know what? Looks like there's Ollie. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, you got my email address. It was on like one of the first slides. So I'd love to hear your feedback. I'd love to keep the conversation going. And I'd love to know how this is all working for you in your world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. It was really awesome presentation. We have a virtual token for you to present.
Thank you.
It's our 12th token for this year. And we wish everyone to have very successful projects and very merry holiday season. And we look forward to see you again in the new year.
I hope to see you guys, maybe even a face-to-face context. That would be awesome.